football business at the moment is it's a fascinating industry to look at and to be involved with. I think if you look at the changes that have happened in the last decade or 2 decades, it's staggering, and I think it's hard to imagine what will happen next, and it's something I'm not going to predict what's going to happen next, but it's an incredible state of transition in many, many ways, phenomenally successful. You look at the levels of revenue that are earned by clubs in some of the top leagues throughout Europe, then it's an extraordinary success story, and we see that in the remuneration offered to players and others, that this looks like an industry which is successful. The other side, of course, is that it perhaps emphasises some of the gaps between leagues in some of the more major European countries and other countries, and we see big divides opening up between leagues between countries and between clubs in those countries. I think that presents challenges for football in its kind of purest sense as a source of competition. The business is booming at the top end, but actually football in Europe has always been about more than just what happens in 1 or 2 important countries. And I think there are challenges for UEFA and for others to try to work out how do we keep football being relevant within some of the other countries within its national associations. We see that the way in which people consume football, the way in which football has a global reach, that part of it is now only part of what the football clubs are. It's still there for many clubs, even the biggest clubs, but of course these clubs are now international brands, they've got an international reach too, and I think presents challenges for clubs to make sure in some ways they don't lose sight of their history and their association with particular cities or regions, because that in a sense gives them their strength, I think, as international brands too. So it's an inevitability as the business grows, but there are risks, I think, for football clubs too, to not forget where they've come from, to not forget that the strength of those clubs comes from some of that connectedness with local communities and local areas. When you look at football clubs, are they businesses? Are they social institutions? Are they a mixture of both? And I think the reality, of course, is that many of them are trying to be a mixture of both. But there's always a risk that when you adopt business approaches or business practices, that you potentially risk or undermine the kind of social relationships that have created the value of the brand in the first place. And I think there's a bit of a balancing act there for clubs and for club executives to live within the business world that they're in. That, of course, is an opportunity for them, but also not in any sense, however inadvertently, to be seen to be kind of exploiting the supporters and only seeing them as kind of customers or opportunities for revenue generation. Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of idea of good practice or in a sense almost a kind of good governance code, I mean, is something that's it's very prevalent within sport generally. There's a lot of pressure on sport organisations, rightly so, to improve their levels of governance, to think about the ways that they engage with their stakeholders, to think about concepts like accountability and transparency. I think it's a good thing for football clubs to do. The challenges you have are the different kind of organisational structures and corporate forms that exist within different countries throughout the world. So it's difficult to see how you maybe put in place a single form. But nonetheless, the idea of best practices or principles of good governance, I think, are things that we ought to encourage. And again, it goes back to that point that yes, they're businesses, but they're also social institutions, and therefore they have to behave in a way which recognises the obligations they have to different groups in society, their supporters, but also to communities and to countries and regions in which they're based. So personally, I would like to see greater emphasis on improvements of or the establishment of principles of good governance. And I think we could overcome the challenges around organisational form, recognising that these are special kinds of institutions. I think if you look at the performance of clubs at the present time, what we're seeing, of course, is increasing numbers of overseas investors coming into the major clubs across the major leagues throughout Europe. And that's a trend that's begun some years ago now, and it shows no signs of abating as the game grows kind of commercially. I think financial fair play, what financial fair play has sought to do is at least ensure that clubs are being run in a way which is financially sustainable. The challenge, of course, always is that people will always look for ways to kind of push at the boundaries of any regulations or to look for ways to gain some advantage around that. And it's a continual challenge for UEFA to actually not just have the rules, but to actually enforce the rules. And that's not going to go away. And I think UEFA are only too well aware of that there's a need for them to actually put their regulations into practice. I think the money that's coming in, those clubs who put more money in, it's no great surprise that they tend to be the ones that are more successful. It's not going to be a great surprise to anyone that that's what's going to continue to happen. But it also remains the case that there will be many, many more losers than there are winners. So they can't all win things. All UEFA can do is try and make sure that the clubs are run in a way which ensures they're sustainable and that offers some kind of accountability to people that extend beyond the providers of financial capital. I think that's probably all it can do at this point in time. That's, I think, very positive is some of the work that UEFA does around its kind of benchmarking and its annual accumulation of financial data. I think that's been tremendous for people who actually want to understand what European football looks like and who want to get a better understanding of its finances. I think UEFA are to be congratulated on the quality of that information and the work that they put into getting it from all the national associations or the clubs in those national associations. I think transparency is something that, speaking a personal point of view, I think it's absolutely essential that football clubs should be transparent and should be accountable, not just to the investors, the financial investors. I think these are institutions that have got a social relevance and that people care about, and they invest in them not just financially but emotionally. And I think there is an obligation on those clubs to actually acknowledge the position of those stakeholders and to be financially accountable and to be socially accountable to those stakeholders. Therefore, there's an obligation on them to explain what they're doing, why they're doing it, and whether or not it's being successful or not. And I think that should be just a basic expectation of good governance in football. I think there are certainly opportunities for I suppose more kind of real-time or more transparent information if you are using technology. I think it's a challenge to do that because probably just the complexity of some of the organisations, the different geographical issues around that. But I think generally speaking, we see more technology being used in corporate reporting and elsewhere. And I think over time, football will probably have to pick up on that as well. But I think there are certainly the trends at the moment to me are positive. We are seeing more information. We're seeing it available on a more timely basis. Over time, I guess that will get better. Maybe technology will be one of the solutions to that. I think these kind of programs are absolutely essential because I think although the quality of professional work that goes on in clubs has changed dramatically over the last 10, 20 years, I think there's still an opportunity to make clubs be better run, to be run in a way which is in the interests of them as good businesses, but also as good social institutions. And I think one of the great things about these kinds of programs is that it's simply upskilling and providing knowledge to individuals who can actually make a difference to the football industry, can make the football industry better. It's easy to criticise the things that have happened, but I think it's not about criticising what's happened in the past. It's trying to make sure that organisations are in the best place to recognise that the very complex and multiple objectives and requirements that are placed upon them. It's not easy. It's not easy to be a business, and a successful business, and to be a social institution and to recognise your obligations in a kind of wider social way.